This week on People in Transition, we welcome Amy Adler, President of Five Strengths Career Transition Experts, and a leading authority in career strategy and executive branding. Amy specializes in helping professionals create powerful resumes and career portfolios that position them for success in a competitive job market. Amy holds top industry credentials, including Certified Master Resume Writer, Certified Executive Resume Master, and Nationally Certified Online Profile Expert. She's an award winning writer and a judge for the Toast of the Resume Writing Industry, as well as the author of Courageous Career Change: Fearlessly Earn the Executive Role You Deserve. With an MBA from Boston College and a BA from Franklin and Marshall College, Amy brings unmatched expertise to every career transition conversation. In this episode, Amy shares practical strategies and insider tips to help you find and land your next great job. Welcome, Amy.
Hello, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Amy, let's jump right in. I hear, and I'm sure you do as well, so many people today feel completely overwhelmed by the job search. It's like everything has just changed overnight. From your perspective, what's the single biggest mistake job seekers are making right now?
I appreciate the question. Thank you for asking. I think, unlike the times of our parents or even ourselves back in our first job, because it was acceptable at the time to just list your experience, put your company names and a couple of things that you did on your resume and call it good. I think the one thing that people are doing wrong now, and I see it all the time, is that people don't think necessarily about what they specifically want to do in the future and just list all of their experiences. And what happens is kind of what happened to a former client of mine who reached out to me in kind of a panic because he'd been sending out hundreds of resumes and getting no interviews. And when we worked together, I encouraged him to think very clearly not only about what he had done, but what he wanted to do, narrow that focus, hone that thought of his about where he wanted to be, and send out 6 resumes in a month instead of, 100. When he did that, after we worked together, he got 3 interviews for his 6 resume applications and was thrilled and wound up getting, after nothing, getting a fabulous new job that I think he had for about a decade, maybe a little bit more, and then moved on to the next thing.
That clarity and direction is really important, I think. And I think it's one of the hardest parts of a job search, which is to figure out what you really want. When someone is feeling stuck or, like your client, pulled in too many directions, what do you suggest as the first step to gain clarity as to the ideal career path for that person?
So, as a resume writer, I am not here to tell people what I think they should do. My role is to be their sounding board, to set up boundaries, if you will, beyond which they couldn't possibly go. So if they say they wanted to be a dentist but never went to dental school, it's incumbent on me to say that. But within that lane that they set up for themselves, there's so many things that any one person could do. And frankly, my clients tend to be really amazing at lots of things. So the first thing I recommend that they do is go to their favorite job board. And instead of putting in job titles as a search term, usually people put in a job title and a geography if they don't want to move. I say, forget geography, put in what you like to do and create complex Boolean searches around the things that you hope to do in your next role. This works very well in Indeed, very well in LinkedIn, and it opens up the aperture for them to see what these jobs are now called, what companies are hiring for them, and gives them a new perspective on the kinds of things that maybe they want to do or kinds of industries they might explore. So they're not stuck in the same thing they were doing before necessarily, and they have the opportunity to see what else is out there in a very low stakes way.
So you're suggesting using Indeed and LinkedIn and so forth more than just a space for looking and applying for roles, but actually using it as a research tool as well?
Absolutely. It's great for that, especially those types of job boards. And of course, there's plenty of other ones out there because they are aggregators. And then when somebody sees a particular job on LinkedIn or on Indeed and the application happens off the platform, they can get a sense of what that company is doing by researching their website, figuring out if the job is still available on their website, and altogether learning more about sort of what is out there for that particular company, maybe the industry, how there's a match, and giving them the chance to apply off the company's website, which I think makes a little bit more sense sometimes.
I've oftentimes get Amy from clients of mine. Yes, I know what my career target is, but it really feels scary to let go of everything else, especially if I'm really worried about not landing anything. How can someone embrace that focus without feeling like they're shutting the doors? It's that candidate that says, Bob, I can do anything. I'm a real fast learner. And that's not the right answer because I don't have a job called anything.
I wish everybody could hear this conversation. It is so foundational to the way somebody needs to think about their job search. And the way to get away, if I can't tell somebody not to be afraid if they have car payments, if they need to make rent, if they have, kids they need to take care of, or a family, whatever it is. I understand the pressure and the expediency of getting anything. But it is much more effective for somebody to move away from I can do anything, which again is entirely possible that it's true. There's so many amazing people out there, and say, this thing is what I can do well. And I am now anticipating what the hiring teams or the recruiting firms are looking for by giving them the thing they need to know to enable them to make a quick decision on me, hopefully in my favor. So if people focus their messaging very, very narrowly, it is a really easy sell and a very easy buy, let's call it, for the recruiting firms and the hiring teams to say, this person answers the questions that I'm having right now. And in fact, that strategy opens up the aperture for the job seeker so they can see much more on a much more granular level what that interaction or that conversation should look like. And by letting everything go, they're taking advantage of this very, very specific focus that enables them. Let's say if somebody called them in the middle of the night, this probably wouldn't happen, but if somebody phoned them in the middle of the night and said, I saw your resume, they would know exactly what that meant and what kind of resume and what topic and what industry. And the conversation would proceed in this theoretical construct much more smoothly. And in reality, it does proceed much more compatibly with what the recruiters and the hiring teams are asking for.
So, Amy, let's talk about resumes for a moment, your sweet spot. And I think everyone knows that they matter, but how can someone make their resume clearly say, look at me, I'm the right fit for this role? And they're going to do that beyond just using some keywords or catchphrases. Are there tips and techniques that you'd suggest?
I can, thank you. And it's about the research and then responding to that research. So the metaphor I like to use is the Olympics logo as a Venn diagram, so circles overlapping. And it's only that particular Venn diagram only has 5 circles. So maybe looking at 5 opportunities that make perfect sense for this individual is the right thing to do. And the more that Olympics logo looks like a circle and less like a series of independent circles, that shaded part in the middle, the more your resume targets that shaded part, the more likely someone is going to say on the other side that this is the kind of person that I am excited about because they're already demonstrating what I need to know about them. And in context, those keywords then make a ton of sense. So listing the keywords isn't going to help, but explaining in context not only what you know how to do, those are the skills, but how well you do them, the sort of challenge action result or situation task action result, car and star kinds of formats that we're all accustomed to hearing in behavioral interviewing. Telling those stories with those words in context opens a whole new set of conversations that wouldn't be available to somebody who just listed in 100 keywords, let's say.
Amy, a lot of professionals, and in my experience, especially women or introverts, and by the way, I love the description that you give of yourself that you are an introvert, but not shy. I think that is a great descriptor. Struggle with owning their own accomplishments. They worry that it sounds braggy or over the top. How do you recommend people talk about their wins with confidence and straddling that line of being overbearing, but making certain that people understand what they've done and they've done it really well?
It's a good question. And I think drawing, as you do, the distinction between shyness and introversion and confidence, it's something else. So overlaying all of these things, a person can have any of these qualities or these characteristics. And the strategy that I would recommend to any of them, and honestly, whether they were men or women, it doesn't matter. And maybe it's true for women more than men. I don't really know, but I hear it from men all the time that telling the story for them sounds like bragging, sounds like blowing their own horn. And I tell them straight out from the gate that this is the one time where not only is it expected that people will tell the good things that they did or that they were instrumental in making happen, not only is it expected, it's almost a demand. This is the only time where your audience is hoping to hear that you did things well, and that showcasing those in this context makes a ton of sense. And done right, in the sense of leveling with your audience, tell them what happened. Tell them the story. You don't have to embellish it. You don't have to overstate it, but tell them the story maybe with a little flavor of I did this well, and you will hook your audience. And it's really, really great to see when that plays out so nicely.
Amy, beyond the resume, what are some other overlooked ways that job seekers can communicate their value to a hiring team? Something that would potentially really set them apart from the hundreds of others that are applying for a role.
Gosh, there might be dozens of responses to your question, but the one that comes to mind straight off the bat, and it's such low-hanging fruit, is to fill out your LinkedIn profile beyond your job title and your company. Add a photo. Be visible for the things you want to be visible for. Be findable for the things you want to be found for. So the easiest way to do this is to copy and paste your resume in. I don't necessarily recommend it, but it's easy to do. But your resume probably has private information, so maybe you want to modify that. If you're feeling ambitious, dig into the story that you want your audience to understand about you and convey that in your LinkedIn profile. I think what makes me so frustrated is job seekers who repeatedly post on LinkedIn, and it's a few loud voices, I think, that they're not getting any traction and their profiles are empty and they've missed a huge opportunity, and I can't figure out why. So that is absolutely something somebody can implement today and change the way that they are presenting, change their thought leadership, change their brand value as perceived on LinkedIn's platform.
What you hope as a resume writer is that your clients get interviews. And oftentimes, before that even happens, they may be going through what is called informational interviews, which can be very powerful. But sometimes people approach them in the wrong way. Can you describe, Amy, what an informational interview might be and how a job seeker can use that to their advantage?
I think the misconception about informational interviewing is that they somehow will turn into job offers by some kind of alchemy that I don't know if anybody really has a handle on. Informational interviews are really good for figuring stuff out, for learning things, and more than that, developing the kind of advocacy and connections in a company that would support an application that would happen on a traditional applicant tracking software, upload your resume kind of application, so that there are humans who can tell you about their jobs. And they don't have to be necessarily people at your level or above your level. Maybe the people most willing to serve as a resource to you are below your level, but they have something you don't, which is intimate knowledge of the organization that they work in because you've never worked there and they do. So there's always something to be learned. And making those connections on LinkedIn, making those connections in real life, and being a person rather than a piece of paper to these folks helps them understand how they can advocate for you should that become the next step in the conversation. And asking for these interviews, I realize, is putting out a question that you might get rejected for. But I hope people don't take it too personally. Everybody's busy. And I hope also that you get the two or three or four people within an organization you're excited about to get on the phone with you and to understand that when you say 15 minutes, you mean 15 minutes. If they extend it, that's up to them. But you're living up to your obligations that you promise and fulfilling their expectations for the things that you're asking for without overstepping the privilege that you're being given by having some of their time.
Amy, I'm seeing more and more people using unique approaches to try to break through the competitive job market, almost what I would call gimmicks, which can backfire. Now, some can be really creative and come across as being authentic. What things have you seen that you think help make an impression that builds trust, but also gets the candidate through the myriad of resumes that are out there?
It's a great question. From what I have learned by following recruiters on LinkedIn who are the source of this knowledge that we as resume writers learn from as far as that is concerned. If somebody sees a job, let's say they have a job, they want to apply for it, that they apply through the formal system because they're never going to get out of having to do that. And then start to make connections around that role. So if they know who posted the job, because sometimes that's available on LinkedIn, connect with that person, explain that you've already applied, give them two or three lines about what you applied for and why you think you're a good candidate, and let it go. So it's not a blanket kind of plain inquiry to connect with the recruiter, and start doing the kinds of things that will, again, build that advocacy, figure out who else is in that department, maybe who the hiring team is. And again, don't overstate, sort of the importance of your particular message, but one or two lines, enough. Get yourself on their radar, and then see how the connection strategy plays out. Who are you getting agreements to connect back from? Is going to be that kind of advocate? And then turning those into live human to human connections. And all of this sidesteps the, writing your resume on a cake or all kinds of crazy things that we hear, and doing things outside the process that don't help you because you're not in the process. People want to be part of, or ought to want to be part of, the data set that falls into the applicant tracking software, not get through it, not get beyond it, but get in it, because that's where the searches are going to take place on the part of the recruiter or the hiring team or what have you.
I heard a great line the other day that your resume should be a picture that the reviewer can look at and see your life, where you're at, where you're going to. What are your thoughts on that analogy?
I think there's something to that, but I think recruiters are putting out on their job postings the goalposts. They're saying, this is what we want. Here are our required qualifications, and here are our nice to haves. So the extent to which they see data that answers those questions or that fulfill those requirements, that is what's going to prick up their ears. Doesn't mean that somebody can't tell a little bit more about themselves, but recruiters are looking for who fits the qualifications and how is this person going to integrate with the team, and are they going to stay? Is this the next logical step for them? I think given the buyer's market we are experiencing now, I don't think job seekers have a lot of opportunity to be creative or expect that somebody will say, oh, this person has an interesting life story, so they belong in our company. I think they're looking for much more specific matches that will get the hiring process done as quickly as possible.
Any thoughts about how AI is being used today in job searches? And the second part of that question, if you pull out your crystal ball, any thoughts about it going forward?
I think the zeitgeist of AI in job search, I think we're still in it, and I think it's virtually terrible on all fronts. And I don't say that because I am a resume writer and I have something to protect. It's not about that. If I have anything to protect, it's the integrity of job seekers who are applying for positions and who want to stand out and sound like themselves and the right solution to whatever problem the hiring team is facing. So AI is being used in everything from resume writing to cover letter writing, even to job applications, automations of job applications. In every case, without careful manipulation of the data that goes into it, and maybe not even then, everything coming out of it sounds the same. And AI tools for job applications are known to hallucinate and write in skills or assets or experiences that the job seeker doesn't have. And they don't know what's going out there because they're paying for X number of applications and that kind of a thing. And when they get called for interviews, they have no substantiation for the things that are now somehow in their resume. So I won't say that AI has no place, 0% place in job search, but if somebody's going to use it, they have to be really, really careful that they don't sound like everybody else, because throwing in a job description and saying, write me a cover letter will yield the same response, virtually the same response, no matter who does that. And I think they have to be wise to what they can take from it and what still enables them to feel unique, to present as the answer again to whatever the company is asking for, and still be their authentic selves. And I think that's where AI fails, in that authenticity.
Yeah, I read something just the other day that up to 20 or 25% of what comes out of AI is just plain wrong and an error. And so when you have a quarter of the information that you're getting back, you have the basis for potentially going down the wrong path.
Well, and then somebody's taken over the process, or a machine has taken over the process. It can't know more about you than you tell it. So why not tell it yourself and let AI do repetitive, easy tasks instead of complex human ones?
You know, that I think lends itself to getting help as a job seeker. And, I think there's so much noise out there, career coaches and LinkedIn experts and resume writers. How can a job seeker figure out who to trust and avoid getting potentially scammed?
This is such a big, big problem with platforms like LinkedIn. And there are people who dedicate themselves to excavating, illuminating these scams. But I think anybody who pitches in a sort of unpleasant and abrasive or maybe arbitrary way that they can solve your problem by writing your resume, even though there's no relationship built there yet. I think that's kind of a problem. I think there are companies that say they are recruiters, but what they're really trying to do is funnel you to a low cost offshore resume writing farm. And there's no real job to be had. The I won't say it's 100% surefire in every case because I don't know every single person in the industry. But if you look at the members of the main professional organizations for resume writers, and there are a couple. So there's Career Directors International, there's Career Thought Leaders, there's the National Resume Writers Association, and there's the Professional Association of Resume Writers and Career Coaches. Those are the four that come to mind. These are people who committed their lives to this industry, and they are likely, very, very likely to be reputable, caring professionals who know what they are doing. And if you drill a little bit deeper and look at people who have won awards or have secured certifications that I promise you are not easy to acquire, you're likely to be fishing in the right pond. So as with everything, your mileage may vary. You may find somebody who's a fabulous resume writer who doesn't do any of these things. It's certainly possible. But I think if you're not sure where to look, start there. Start with one of those and continue to vet what you are reading. Look at their recommendations, look at their website, figure out if their photo is real on LinkedIn. That's really key. All of these things will help you narrow in on who your likely your likely pool of resume writers is going to be, and then talk to them. If you can't talk to your resume writer, that's kind of a red flag. So talk to people. It's why I keep my phone on all the time. I want people to reach out, even if I can't help them for whatever reason. If it's not a good match, I never want people to think they can't talk to a real human. I think people sometimes are surprised that I answer my phone when it rings, but I do, and that's part of my brand.
I just heard on an earlier podcast that someplace between 15 and 30% of all the jobs listed on LinkedIn are probably fake jobs. They're ghosts. And so this whole notion in terms of just because it's on LinkedIn, it must be good is an error.
It's so true. I think it's incumbent on any individual user of the platform to be very wise about what they are looking at and to be skeptical, kind of until proven otherwise. And try talking to people, try figuring out who has worked with a recruiter before, does the website make sense? Is it a new company? If it's a new company, can you verify that it's a real new company? Can you look at the website and discover its age? Can you look at the recruiter's profile, the person who put the job out there, and see that they've been in recruiting for a certain amount of time? Does their email look like the company's email? This is a big one. So let's say there's, recruiting company ABC that's out there. And all the emails are recruitingcompanyabc.com. But maybe there's a Gmail that looks like recruitingcompanyabc@gmail.com. That's never going to be the company that people are seeking. It's never going to be the real individual. And we see this in virtually every configuration. Even a cursory search for this sort of thing on LinkedIn will probably yield a bunch of posts about how this is happening to the detriment of everyone in that ecosystem. So it's a kind of buyer beware situation with respect to the kinds of positions that are out there, the jobs that are being posted, and honestly, with resume writers too.
Amy, if who is listening to this is feeling completely discouraged right now, and that emotion is present with lots of job seekers, and they feel like they've tried everything, and from their perspective, nothing seems to be working, what's the one or two pieces of advice you'd want them to take away from this conversation to help them?
It's such a good question. And I think people do feel discouraged and angry and sad and scared. Maybe the first thing they need to do is kind of diagnose where in the process things are breaking down. So if somebody is not making connections on LinkedIn, maybe they're not putting out any connection requests on LinkedIn. If they're not getting interviews, that's the problem with the resume, or maybe something with their connection strategy. So diagnosing at that point means fix your connection strategy or fix your resume and do it with reputable resources. You don't have to hire somebody. There are plenty of books out in the library that are free, that are of good use. And I just heard this week, people are getting interviews with their resume, whatever it says, I don't know, but not closing that deal. So that's a problem with interview strategy. So rewriting your resume or the resume isn't going to fix that because they need to address the problem at a different location in the timeline. So being very aware of where they are in the process and what about the way they are working is causing this sense of discouragement, I think will help them narrow in on what they can specifically do to do better. And I think any reputable resume writer will gladly get on the phone with one of these folks and help them figure this out. I know I certainly would always do this. I'm like I said, my phone's always on. So if somebody had a question, where am I failing? Where am I going astray? I might be able to help them figure out what they need to do. And sometimes that's all the conversation is. And I'm glad to do that for people, kind of for free. Like just call me up and ask me the question. Because the worst thing is not knowing what the issue is. And trying everything, quote unquote, isn't necessarily the same thing as fixing the one thing that they can probably get a handle on.
What a great conversation. And I hope today's conversation with Amy Adler fired you up and gave you the push to take bold steps in your own career journey. Together, we can turn uncertainty into momentum and momentum into results. This is your time to lean in, to get clear on what you want and go after it with confidence. If you're ready to make your next move, your very best one, I know, as Amy has said, or myself, we'd be honored to coach you through it. Let's start building that future you've been dreaming about. Your next chapter is waiting, so let's make it happen. Amy, thank you so much for the discussion today. I really appreciated it.
It's been so delightful to chat. Thank you so much for having me.